Hello, this is Dr. Darnise coming back with another installment from my House of Religion, Magic, and Conjure. Welcome back. Please subscribe if you have not already and hit the notification bell so you know when I'm coming back on with more good stuff like this. What I want to talk about today is something again ripped from the headlines, and it has to do with my series on Black Church So Messy. But this one is not so much Black Church. This is the whole evangelical Christian movement right now. And what we see in terms of the evangelical church, which is failing Black people and has been for some time. But here's another installment on how that's working out. Just from the news, just from the last few days, and it has to do with the Southern Baptist Seminaries. As a denomination, the Southern Baptist Seminaries have announced that they are not interested in talking about race in their seminary. So they are ready to denounce racism as a personal sin, but they are not willing to say that racism is a systemic problem. They're not willing to say that racism stems from white supremacy in any sort of systemic kind of a way. So they will only acknowledge that racism is a personal sin, that one person can hold prejudices and act in racist ways against another person individually, and they want to take those individuals to task, but they do not acknowledge that there's a pattern of racism in America, and certainly it's not a pattern in our police force or in any educational institutions or in any church institutions such as their own. Okay, so they're tripping, right? Now, you have to think about what this means in terms of seminary. So these are the presidents of the Southern Baptist Seminaries, a group of seminaries. And what does a seminary do? Seminaries train people for the clergy, by and large. I mean, one could go to seminary and not, come out with a Master of Divinity and not preach. But for the most part, those who go to seminaries are people who want to become clergy, who intend to be ministers of churches. And what they're saying is, the presidents of the Southern Baptist seminaries, is that they're not going to teach critical race theory. They're not going to teach about intersectionalities in any of their seminaries. So they're not going to train their future clergy that racism is a systemic problem in America. They're not going to train their clergy to look at the intersections of things like gender and race. So for somebody like me, a Black woman, they're not interested in the things that might affect my life as a Black person who's also a woman, or a woman who's also a Black person, or any intersection, a person who's Black and male, a person who's white and female, like whatever your intersection, they're not interested in that. And really, as I read these things, I have the story up on my computer here. As I read it, they don't even seem to really know what it is. They don't really seem to know what critical race theory is. They don't seem to really know what intersectionality is. I think, well, not just me, but it's clear that a lot of white evangelicals just really don't understand the conversation about race and racism. They just feel such a sense of guilt, and they're trying to avoid dealing with that guilt, that they don't want to talk about race at all, as if racism is no longer a problem. And so they're bringing this into their church, into the way they practice their Christianity. And that's why it's failing Black people. And that's why Black people are leaving and actively seeking out other traditions, like going back to our own African spiritualities, or seeking out anything else. Because there's a certain segment, many young Black people, many of them are young Black people, there's a certain segment that don't want the hypocrisies anymore. Like, really, how are you going to go to a place of worship that says, yes, you're welcome here, as long as you don't talk about your own experiences as a Black person or a Black woman? As long as you don't talk about what your life is like in America, you're welcome. But if you expect us to engage with you on the level of all of your intersections and how we see white supremacy active in our societies. No, we don't want to do that. So that's a failure. And so if you're a Black Christian, you're still going to have to work that out for yourself, I guess. You're going to have to figure out, how can you still be a part of an institution that's telling you that who you are culturally and in your personal identity really doesn't matter? And they really just don't want to hear it. I mean, essentially they're saying to you, we don't want to hear it. Now, you have to think, who benefits also from this decision when they're saying we're not going to talk about systemic racism, we're not going to talk about intersectionality. Who benefits from that form of miseducation? Clearly, it's them. It's them, because it's very difficult for institutions to admit when they're wrong. It's difficult for, white people in America, particularly these days, to talk about the racism that has been inherent in America since its beginning. And that's what critical race theory is. Critical race theory says, let's look at the different ways in which racism and white supremacy have been active in our country since its inception and the various ways that it remains active today. It means let's look at the various ways in which it's active today. So yes, we have to look at our educational systems. We have to look at the police force. We have to look at our religious institutions. We have to look at every institution, because we know that white supremacy is a thing, and we know that it's inherent in the way this country was established. So what they're saying is they don't want to do that. Okay, why don't they want to do that? The usual just guilt. Oh, I'm uncomfortable. Like some white people will say, well, it just makes me uncomfortable and then I feel guilty. So everyone else who has to live with that on a daily basis and has had to live with that for centuries, we should just get comfortable. We should just remain in our discomfort. We're uncomfortable, but we don't want to affect their comfortability, so we shouldn't. So I don't know. I'm just kind of, in some ways, I'm almost just amazed at it. I'm like, really? They're really taking this position in almost 2021. Well, for one thing, we know that the evangelical Christians have remained or tried to remain loyal to President number 45, the outgoing President number 45. They're still trying to remain loyal to him. And his party line is that critical race theory is not something we want to engage in. Systemic racism is not something that actually exists. Yes, I know you see these things happening, but we're not going to talk about those things. So the evangelical Christians have really become in league with the political system, and they are in defense of whiteness. Clearly, they just want to defend whiteness and the status quo as is. There's no other way really to understand this. It's just, we're going to defend whiteness no matter what. So again, Black Christians, what are you doing in that denomination or in any of those denominations? It's not for you. And they keep telling you it's not for you. Let's see, I wrote down some notes here, some things that I wanted to mention. Well, I had Black Christians, their religion is not your religion. And so I know, many Black Christians who will say, well, that's not that's not the religion of Jesus, or that's not, I don't want to throw away my religion because of these white people or these white racist people. And I would just say, their religion is not your religion. They're not practicing it the same way you're practicing it. They're holding true to a form of status quo that is racist through and through, and they would rather hold on to it. They keep saying in various ways they'd rather hold on to that than you. And this has been true since 1845, when the denomination was formed. They came about because they wanted to remain slaveholding, and they wanted to remain segregationists. They wanted that. They defended the morality of slaveholding. That was them. And here in nearly 2021, very end of 2020 we're in right now, they're still saying like, no, there might be some racism out there, but we don't believe it's systemic. We don't believe there's a pattern to it. No, we don't think there's a pattern to it. So what happened to it? I would always say, it's like, well, what happened to it then? If you admit that it once existed, and they've even come out and apologized for trying to defend the morality of slavery, they even apologized for that and said, well, we should not have defended slavery. And yet, they step into another quagmire when they won't admit that there is systemic racism. Okay, so what else did I want to say here? There's so much here. I mean, I could unpack, critical race theory and intersectionality if y'all want. You want to do another class on that, like I did that Black theology class. We could do that. We could do that just as a sort of one-off or maybe 2-session class, at some point soon this month, or, coming up here soon if you want a class. I could do that. It'll cost a little bit of money, but, nothing extraordinary, nothing like tuition. So I guess I'll wrap it up. The video's getting a little long. Let me know, do you want a class on critical race theory and intersectionality? We could do that. But, here's just to say, the Southern Baptist Convention, they're not ready. They're not ready to move forward past racism. They're saying that they're ready, but when it comes down to it, they're like, we don't see a problem. So why should we train our clergy? Why should we train our clergy that there is systemic racism in America? So they're basically saying that they're going to train their clergy, but inadequately. The training that the clergy is going to get from them is inadequate. So when a group of people, a mixed group, a diverse group of people are sitting in the churches led by their trained clergy, the clergy there will actually be inadequate to deal with life in America. But they would rather. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Like I said, don't forget to subscribe. If you hung on this long, thank you. Subscribe, click the notification bell. Let me know if you want that class, Critical Race Theory and Intersectionality. Bye for now.